everyone, Ads here, and thank you so much for taking the time to download and listen to this week's show. As ever, if you like what we do, please give the show a like and a share, and if you love what we do, please consider becoming a Patreon. And this week's show, I've invited back a former guest and friend of mine, Emma River Roberts. Emma created last year an organisation called the Working Class Climate Alliance, and we're also joined by Sasha Josette, who's also a co-member of the Alliance. For people that know me, some of my favourite shows are when I'm talking about working class and what we offer and our place within the climate movement and the fight against climate breakdown. And so, I'm always happy to talk with people that feel the same. Topic for the show this week are the mainstream environmental movement as a whole, how and why the WCCA was created, the strength of the working class, the importance of class consciousness, the importance of community, and the importance of drawing from our heritage in regards to the struggles ahead. For anybody that's interested in working class perspectives, opinions, it's essential viewing, I do believe, and I really hope that you do too. So hope you enjoy the show, and let's crack on. Welcome everyone to the Green New Deal podcast, part of your favourite environmental platform, GND Media. You guys know who I am by now, and I'm happy to welcome back a former guest and founder of the Working Class Climate Alliance, Emma River Roberts. And joining Emma is one of the WCCA's core members, Sasha Josette. A warm welcome to you both.
Hello. Hi,
Great
nice to be back.
You. Yeah, great to see you both. So, Emma and Sasha, I always ask new guests, and apologies, Emma, if I've already asked you this before, but I always like to know when the first time that you sort of realised whether it was an evolution or a moment where you realised that the climate crisis was something so big and all-encompassing that you felt you just had to get involved in some way, whether it's the environment movement or part of your work. So, Sasha, can we come to you first?
Yeah. When was the first time the environmental crisis became real? I think, in all honesty, it was probably more of an evolution. So the time it was very much in my face, which I suppose you could say is a credit to XR, but during the whole time of the rebellions, and where you couldn't kind of move in London you couldn't move in London because there was so much direct action. And in one sense, that was really good to see that kind of level of direct action, and it hadn't been something that we had seen around the climate movement at that scale.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, I'd walk through the city of London and just be like, who are these people? Where did they come from? This is not the people I grew up with, or went to school with. So where are my people? Why are they not here? Mm-hmm. And by my people, I mean working class, black and brown, where the people who I imagined to actually be closest to the pain of this crisis.
Yeah.
And I still didn't get involved then, because, single mum life, and it just how you got involved felt so far away and not very tangible. And then around 2016, 2017, I was involved in the whole Corbyn accident moment project, and eventually started working in the Labour Party and was in the community organising unit. And I'd been asked to go and work with Becky Long-Bailey on the Green Industrial Revolution. And at the same time, started to get involved in Labour for Green New Deal, just more of as a spokesperson. But I was just like, okay, now I need to know what the Green New Deal is. What's a New Deal? What's a Green New Deal? Never heard of these words before. Haven't heard of what a just transition means. There were all this suddenly a whole new language of words which felt more like walls and barriers than something that resonated. So kind of went on a bit of a learning journey and talked to Becky and her policy team. I was like, can we do something around the Green Industrial Revolution policy? Because this, at the time, was considered one of the most radical climate policies in Europe.
It was, yeah, it was.
And so, so I talked to her about, can we have can we build a movement around this, an organising strategy around this? And her policy team, and they were so good. She got it straight away, what I was trying to say. And I haven't seen a harder working MP in all my time. And she was out every weekend. How she kind of managed to have that and her family life is, she's really dedicated to the whole kind of journey of it. And we were going to deindustrialized areas all over, all the kind of what the people were calling Labour leave areas, kind of voted Brexit. and having conversations with people, roundtable events about what an environment policy would mean to you.
I went to one of them. Yeah.
Did you?
Yeah,
oh, that's so cool.
I was part of Labour for a Green New Deal, the Manchester crew part. Yeah. In fact, this podcast grew out of members that met, that were Labour members that met via Labour for a Green New Deal.
Amazing.
So
did you come to the Bolton policy event?
Not the Bolton one. No, there was one in Manchester. Or Salford. One in Salford. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Amazing. That's so cool. What a nice connection.
Yeah.
Honestly, if I could do that work for the rest of my life, I would. It was amazing being able to. We'd have tables with like Green New Deal, school strikers, the Vicar, Women's Institute, workers from the nuclear power plant, like the fracking nanas, like all of these people around the table talking about what a just transition for transport would look like, jobs, education. And, these would be in places that were like old mining towns who had promises had been made over and over and over again. So like the trust was so low.
That's right.
And
it's important.
It was just like right in front of my face that community solutions were right there. We didn't need to go to fancy climate wonks, policy wonks. Like we have these solutions. We know how to solve problems in our communities. We just need the organising around it. And I think it was that kind of journey with Becky's team that really did it.
Yeah, for me. Interesting. Yeah. Emma, how did you first realise the shit with
well, it's a slightly different answer to what I gave last time I was on, because the NDA is kind of over, but I still have to be a little bit scant with the details. But I ended up working for a conglomerate because I lost my job as an archaeologist in the recession. Now, when I worked there, I noticed what I thought was money laundering, sort of all these financial crimes happening. And after a 2-year investigation that had ended with the Financial Conduct Authority, they said, oh, actually, they've done nothing wrong. So I was clearly wrong. So, and when I started sort of looking into it and sort of actually looking at what the company and the people were facilitating in terms of like fossil fuels, workers' rights, and when I saw actually that power that after 2 years they can say, oh, they did nothing wrong, I think that's when I was like, oh shit, no one's coming for us. Because no one's been held to account. Obviously, I can't name any names, but it's bollocks. And I think, okay, that's when we have to take things into our own hands, because, when you have enough money, you can do anything you want.
You were radicalised through staring into the abyss and realising nobody's coming to save us.
Yeah, pretty much. Like just partaking in our own misery, like existing on literal poverty wages, working for some of the richest people in the world, 6 days a week, and they're getting away with fucking everything. I was like, I'm not doing this.
Yeah. Okay. Well, tonight, Emma, is all going to be all about, what we can do about that, as working class people specifically. So tell us all about the Working Class Climate Alliance. Yeah, how did it first take form in your mind? And what were the steps to, bringing people like Sasha on and and making something tangible?
It's come out of years of work with activist movements, especially Extinction Rebellion, that I found was very classist. Sasha mentioned, race blind, not sort of a very accommodating space for people with disabilities as well. And what I've realised is that working class people need our own space. We need an autonomous space to say things as we see it, because in mainstream environmentalism, if a working class person like kind of kicks back against classism, they tend to be gaslighted and being told that, oh, they're being divisive, or, oh no, this is how we always do it, which is bollocks. But the final kind of, I think, factor that pushed me into doing it was I was at the Beyond Growth conference in the European Parliament. Was that last year? It was last year, wasn't it? I think so.
Do you know what? Time and me, we don't mix.
No.
100 years ago for I know.
Yeah. We'll go with last. I'm sure it was last year. And yeah. And there was virtually no mention of working class people there at all.
Right. Yeah.
when I spoke to somebody who was involved in organising the conference, and I have to stress this by saying they weren't saying it in bad faith, they really did mean it in a nice way. They said, well, it had nothing to do with the working class because it was a conference about policy making. And I was like, oh, shit, okay. So that's kind of what really pushed me into, okay, we're going to have to do things our way because other people's doing it's just not working.
Yeah, cool. So then you created it, and even the name itself. Where did you come up with the name? I'm always interested in the sort of the finer details. Also, Working Class Climate Alliance. What was it about the word alliance that sort of drew you to sort of take that as a title?
So I needed it to be shortened to something like the WCCA rather than some like long sort of acronym. But it was between that or O for organisation. And I was kind of going between the two, but with Alliance, kind of to me, what it represents is a network of working class individuals, grassroots movements who are engaging in struggles in their own way. So it's not me.
Word.
Yeah, so it's not me saying, right, I'm a socialist, so everyone has to adhere to the exact same principles. Actually, we have members in the global south who do things very differently. So it's kind of just coming together.
I've known you for a little while now, Emma, and I know that you've been involved in the degrowth movement, which, listen, we don't need to go into degrowth because regular listeners to the show don't know what degrowth is. We've covered it extensively. But is it predominantly a degrowth project, or is it a case of that's your thing and that's the ideas you bring to the conversation, but collectively there's multiple ideas that are being thrown around?
So it's not a degrowth project. We've actually withdrawn from the International Degrowth Network today. So it's
today.
Yeah.
Tell us more what happened. Exclusive.
Stepping outside of that, we're not. We don't officially endorse any one alternative to the system, but to me, I found that being part of the network, we're effectively endorsing the degrowth movement as a whole, and it remains very Eurocentric, white, middle class, and criticisms have been going for years and years, and we're still seeing it. And I think I'm effectively saying this is okay, and it's not. Year after year after year, conferences come out, which is kind of their main event. Every year, within the movement, people are going, this is so white. Why has everyone got PhDs? Where are their trade unions? And I think it just got to the point where actually I was like, it's probably best because I would be bringing people into that space where there's no representation for them.
Okay.
And it shouldn't fall on the marginalised to carve out spaces of inclusion for them. It should be on the people to remediate the things that they're getting wrong, and they know what they're getting wrong. So, but we're not anti-degrowth; we're just not endorsing.
Yeah, and you know what? That's really interesting. A good time we got you on today for that exclusive. But yeah, I mean, for me, so we've got a friend of the show. It's called Kai Herring. I'm sure you'll know who Kai is. Yeah, he's a top guy. He said something recently that really struck a chord with me and made me think, actually, yeah, that's probably why I don't claim to be a degrowther, And his point is that a lot of what's classed as degrowth today is really just eco-socialism. Eco-socialism is almost like an umbrella of term for lots of different ideas, and a lot of degrowth isn't unique ideas to them. They've just got some nice little nuanced ideas, So that really struck me. So are you more considering the alliance as being more of an eco-socialist group now, where all ideas about environmental issues and theories and whatnot can flow freely and be discussed? Is that the plan now? Or was that always the plan?
I would say so. We have an eco-socialist campaign, but I think what we're going to be doing is looking at sort of other language that people use elsewhere, because although eco-socialism to you and me means all of these different things, I think for some people they might go, well, we don't identify with that quite so much.
Right. Yeah.
So at the moment we're using eco-socialism to represent that, but I think over time that might change.
Yeah. Now, before we start talking about the working class, which I want to spend the majority of the time with, Sasha, you did mention that you were not so much a part of XR, but XR was sort of in your face in London for a while. And I know you've written about XR as well in an article. So let's the things about XR, they put environmentalism like on the map globally. Yeah, they took it from being niche to being sort of mainstream. Yeah. Okay, and we've got to give them credit for that. And now I actually was part of the first class of Manchester XR. I actually left simply because, although it was full of good people, it wasn't necessarily my people, my working class culture, and I felt like, you know, good luck to you, but it's not a space for me. Yeah. But let's talk about XR. Let's talk about environmentalism as a whole, as it stands now. What are some of the issues? I mean, I think you touched on it in regard to sort of race and whatnot. But what are some of the issues around environmental mainstream movement as it stands today that you maybe got issues with?
It was the issues part of the question that is the tricky bit. I think so. The thing with XR is I completely agree. It did something really incredible to bring the issue to people's faces. It had that sense of emergency, urgency. There is no planet B, A, whatever.
There's no planet B. Yeah. Among many other slogans, yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, a slogan it catches imagination, but it's got to have something.
But you know what? They were good at comms. Their merch was really good. They were good at comms. You saw it everywhere. Lost me at Beyond Politics. And I think that kind of leads to, do actually feel like, if I'm being kinder to XR and all our friends in there, that actually there are a lot of people within XR who are thinking about what the next iteration needs to be. Like, what is that next formation that it needs to be in order to meet the multiple crises that we are facing? I think they've understood that something that they like repeating it over and over isn't going to necessarily work as a strategy, but what that becomes, we don't know right now. But I think the kind of key issue is, for me, is that a lot of our energy and resources, and I say our as in like the royal climate we, goes into the part of that kind of ecosystem thinking, into kind of like the direct action, the resistance, the fight back, which is fantastic. It's not actually a criticism. We also have to look at like the state power, and then we have to look at building the world that we want to see. Like for me, that's the community organizing. That is kind of the joy that we have together. That is sharing food, dancing, imagination, creativity, where all the ideas that need to feed state power, to feed resistance movements, and kind of create this like naturally sustainable system of activism and resistance needs to happen. And so like everything just got flooded into this kind of, it's an emergency. And actually like no one's going to join an emergency, because like, if you're working class, that's just like, every day is an emergency. You know, if you're on universal credit and doing 3 jobs and have 2 children and you're a single mom, like, when is it not an emergency? Why is this emergency everything I have to drop my life for?
Yeah.
And so I think there needs to be also an understanding across the whole movement that all of these spaces are important. It's about how we do them, how we're strategically aligned, how we're politically aligned. Do we have a class analysis? Do we have a race analysis? And if we don't, go home, because you're actually doing more damage than good, frankly. So if like we have that whole system thinking, then we have a chance.
Yeah, they were definitely naive. You know, they were asking for the climate emergency, but there was no system like there was a slogan, system change, not climate change, that sort of fed in halfway through. But it was meaningless. You know, I never heard any anti-capitalist talk in meetings. I never heard about how capitalism is the issue. It was just about who can tweak what we've got the fastest to get us out of this emergency. That's how it came across. So very naive politically. For me, you know, the middle class. The strength of the middle class is that they've got a lot of downtime, yeah, and within that downtime,
imagine that.
exactly. But the strength of that downtime is, and also, generally speaking, the education that they've had, they're able to look at the world not just day to day, but also month to month, if not year to year, and they can see what's on horizons. They can ponder, they can debate, and they can see that the planet, is dying, at a rapid rate. And the way I sort of analysed it was that the middle class are like the fire alarm, yeah, but the working class are the firefighters. Yeah, that's how I see it. They can't stop it because they're not big enough. Yeah, they're not resistant enough. They're not built of the same stuff. Yeah. However, their place is they saw it. They saw it in their downtime, and they set that alarm off. And I'll be forever grateful that they have set that alarm off. But it is now down to us, the biggest class, the strongest class, the class that any system that's going to come after, any system at all, whichever one you want to choose, it's going to need the working class. It's going to need the working class to do the hard labour. Yeah, so we have to be front and centre. So I take all your points there, Sasha. Let's move on to this working class then, yeah? Let's do it. Emma, talk to us about the working class. Why is the working class so important that you had to create a group called the Working Class Climate Alliance? What is it about the working class, in your view, that is essential to this struggle?
Well, I mean, from one, we have like the obvious strategic relationship to the means of production, but I think, like, personally, we have that grit, we have that kind of resistance where, for many of us, we've had to go toe to toe with, the police, or, in terms of legal stuff, we have to look out for our own kind because nobody else does. And I remember sort of growing up, we would look out for each other against like police brutality, or people trying to rob your bloody house. You kind of have to develop this hardened shell, and I think when it comes to really going up against the rich and powerful, you need that grit. And I find with the middle class, because they've had a very comfortable life in the material sense, they don't know how to I think, resist in any other way apart from like retreating, if that makes sense. So like, designing. Yeah. Oh, they love a petition, or a vegetable garden. And there's nothing wrong with growing your own cabbages and shit like that. But you're not going to build a movement of it. And I think we're not afraid really to to get up and challenge people.
Yeah. Well, they've benefited from the system that's been created, and so they haven't built up any resistance. And not only that, I think it's naive at this stage to think that the system is going to change simply through logic and reason alone. Yeah, it isn't going to change. It's going to have to be changed for all our survivals. And when that happens, the system is going to fight back. Okay, there's only one class that historically will have any chance of fighting back against a system that is refusing to change. And that is the one with the numbers. That's the ones with the heritage. And that is the ones that have had their heads beaten in for 200 years since the Industrial Revolution. Yeah. And that's basically us. So I see it in very sort of clear terms in that sense. Would you agree, Sasha?
Yeah, I mean, I would say longer than 200 years, because we've had a feudal system for many hundred years.
Yeah.
And before that,
I'm going off the technical working class.
Yeah, and also just thinking
yeah.
about colonial struggles as class struggles as well. That we have centuries and centuries of history of resistance and history of taking on power, and also winning.
That's it.
And I think that's something that we need to remember as we go into like what the next like formation. I keep using that word formation. I don't know why. It just seems to be at the top of my head. But like, what does that? It's kind of militaristic. What does that look like? We do stand, and I like that you kind of looked back a bit, because like we do stand in the shoulders of these amazing revolutionary giants. And we have won in the past, and we can win again, and we just have to kind of remember where we came from, what they like, who the enemy is now, and what that pushback in terms of state violence is going to be, and actually start thinking really strategically. And I think that's why, just to go back to your question about the Working Class Climate Alliance, what really like drew me to the word alliance is that that's exactly what we need in order to kind of join those dots of our liberation struggles. Like, how do we actually do that? We form alliances, we form coalitions, And as working class people, and as particularly as women and feminists in working class struggle, our safety relies on alliances and coalition. No, so this is something that we absolutely embed into our like feminist struggles, for our safety, for the numbers that we need. And those are the things that we've seen working in like the feminist movement in Chile, for example. So I was really drawn to the word alliance.
Yeah, and you know what? You're spot on as well. I was obviously talking about sort of the creation of the proletariat, but it goes back further, like you say, centuries. And you're right. We have to draw on this. You know, we are the children of revolutionaries, and it's kind of been written out of. I mean, let's just take, for example, the English Revolution. Yeah, in our history books, it's the English Civil War. Mm-hmm. You know, in other countries, it's known as the English Revolution. They've tried to sanitize a revolution that happened and was just as important as the French Revolution. So we're happy to look at the French Revolution and call it a French Revolution because it didn't affect us, yeah. But our own revolution, we call it a civil war. So you know, I as a student of history, and Emma, you were an ex-archaeologist, you said, yeah. So it's amazing, you know, to draw back on the past, you know, is where we should gain our strength. And you know, the sad thing is, in my opinion, class consciousness as a whole is probably the weakest it has maybe ever been, at a time when we need it to be the strongest it has ever been. So let's just move on to class consciousness, because it is so important as well. And I do want to talk about sort of intrinsically connecting it with climate consciousness as well. But let's just focus on climate consciousness. You know, that's our anchor, isn't it? Class consciousness is the working class. It's our anchor. It's where we draw our strength. So either of you want to talk about the importance of class consciousness for us and our movement?
I mean, it tells us sort of who we are, really. You know, we've always been at the arse end of capitalism or any other sort of economic structure. And especially where in modern society, when people are so alienated from each other, so, you know, on their own, class consciousness will show that we are united across country borders, you know, internationalist, right, and united in a shared struggle, which manifests in various ways and to different degrees. And when you see that, when you see yourself as part of something bigger, that's a massive, it's not the only, but it's a really sort of massive push towards going and taking empirical action. And I think the sort of protests for sort of the Palestinian plight is actually a really good example of this, because, you know, we can see students in America making all of these, you know, incredible gains in terms of getting universities to divest, and that's having an impact in England, in other countries, and so on. So it's just that shared awareness of the strength of who we are and the efficacy of our actions.
Yeah. And what I love about it is, like you say, it crosses borders, you know, it transcends nationalism, you know, which class consciousness means anybody in the world that is part of that working class are our brothers and sisters. And it multiplies and amplifies the numbers and the struggle. Yeah. And I think what we need to do is, I think one of the big ones was when we sort of outsourced our manufacturing. And so we lost a lot of our, what we class as our traditional working class bases. Yeah, they've been changed and they've been modernized, and, you know, there is industries that didn't used to exist that really are just where working class people have settled. But it's making the connections, and I suppose it connects with climate change, because when people say things like, oh, what about China, what about India's pollution and all that, and, you know, when you educate people and say their pollution is our pollution, we've exported our manufacturing, yeah, so that they can sell us back cheap goods. You know, their pollution is our pollution, and people get that. When you tell people that, they go, actually, that makes a lot of sense. But it's having the sort of announcers to say they are us and we are them. You know, in some countries, it feels like they are us from maybe 100 years ago. Yeah. In some countries, it might feel like they are us in 50 years' time, depending on where the level of economics the country is. But we have to see the core tenant being they are us and we are them. And the struggle is the same. Yeah, do you agree, Sasha? You're writing something down there, and you're
yeah, just so that I don't forget. Yeah, I do agree, and I think the challenge for us as people involved in the climate movement and working class and organisers and activists in different ways is that how do we articulate that?
Yeah.
How do we articulate that internationalism? And absolutely, I think, understanding our history and the class analysis and being able to tell that story is kind of really important. But I think like almost like when you were kind of describing as a historian the story of the English Civil War / Revolution, it's like how that it was revolution. Like that's what kind of like, oh, something went off in my head, and I thought, well, that's an interesting story. And I think that's something that actually, during feudal times, colonial times, industrial revolution, that they took from us is our stories. They take our the first thing they take from working class people is our language. Mm-hmm. So in Scotland, they like wiped out the bards. We are storytellers. We have a very, very strong oral tradition, and that's how we connect with each other. Across the seas, we connect with each other this way. And it's so important and it's so powerful, this kind of tradition of ours, that it was enough. It was powerful enough for them to take it away and make it illegal.
Yeah.
And I think bringing that art back and claiming it as our own, because it is. It's a working class art form. It's how we can talk to each other. It's how we can warn each other.
And inspire each other.
And inspire each other, yeah.
Yes,
we can dream the future that we want. And if we can dream a future that we want, we can fight for it. So, yeah, for me, it was like, there's something there around how we come together to share that story. Like this podcast, like kind of finding 100 ways to tell the story of who we are and what we can do together.
It's reconnecting with our heritage, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Which is long, vast, it's bloody, it's been defeats, there's been victories. But the thing is for me, Sasha, is this next fight, we have to win it. There's no second chance, so we have to come hard on this one, because, this is climate breakdown. We're already seeing in this country now. For years it was in the global south, so it was sort of like, oh, you don't have to look over, you don't have to worry about that. But it's now, it's on our doorstep. Let me tell you something now. This is how on our doorstep it is. Okay, I've got a good friend of mine who lives in Staley Bridge, which is up here. If you've not heard of it, it's just up here.
That's where all the floods happen, right?
Well, floods are common in the north of England, okay? Yeah. So you kind of expect floods, even though they're getting worse and it's getting wetter, a flood is not uncommon, right? On his terraced street, a tornado came down his street, in Staley Bridge, and it damaged about 100 houses, okay? And I think about 5 of those houses had their roofs ripped off. Now, fortunately, it's a really, really long street that he has, okay? And he saw it, and eventually it slowed down. Yeah, it was like it wasn't like one of those American ones that like massive, like like apocalyptic. It was just, it came, it did a load of damage, it dispersed, and it was gone, and it left a lot. And it reminded me of a podcast that I did. It was a brilliant one, if I say so myself. It was a lady from New York. It was a Working Class Voices series that I was doing. And she was an organizer in New York for the largest working class climate protest in American history. It was like 70,000 people, working class led. And they shut down a bank, and some of them got arrested. Not arrested in the same way like XR did, like we're staying till we get arrested, we're going to sit on the floor and you get arrested, and it can be a bit performative. They didn't plan to get arrested. It was just the sheer anger and frustration, that overspilled, and they got arrested. It was like what I would call an authentic arrest, And the reason that they were protesting was because there was been some floods last year in New York, unbelievable floods. You might have seen like the subways were full of water. It was insane, And this is the point we have to get across, and I'll tell you why in a second. New York is the richest city of the richest country that humanity has ever created. Okay, so in the richest city, in the richest country humanity's ever created, these floods happen. That's okay, right? But again, the poorest working class, yeah, they don't have the funds and the capacities to just brush these off. Now, they're usually in the worst neighborhoods, some of them in basement apartments, yeah, these sorts of things. And so, whereas somebody with a bit of wealth was inconvenienced for, say, like a week, yeah, for working class communities, when these storms hit and these tornadoes hit and all that, we don't have the funds to continuously get ourselves back on our feet. And some of those people who were fighting the state and all that, trying to get pots of money, some of it was 6 months before people were sorted out. So the wealthy were a week or a couple of days, and working class people can be 12 to 6 months trying to get funds. And if this continuously happens, those state funds are not going to be there every time, and we're going to be left on our own. Yeah. And the reason why that message is so important is because whenever I speak to people that are working class activists in other countries, what's radicalized them is that there's been an event first and the radicalization has happened second. It's been almost like a retrospective activism. Yeah. But for us, that's not going to work. We have to be proactive. We have to somehow inspire our class before we get hit. Because once you get hit, you're already at a weakened state. Do you know what I mean? And somehow I feel like our job in the UK is to try and get ahead of the curve of what's coming for our communities. And I think that's the biggest struggle we have. So obviously, I mean, you've created an organisation that's trying to inspire working class people. And Sasha as well, what can we do to educate and inspire our communities before we get hit hard?
I would say meet people where they're at in terms of what's their most pressing concern. So there was a poll, and I can't remember who did the poll, but in terms of what are you most concerned about? And the climate emergency was probably about fifth or sixth down the list. Top was, it was the cost of energy prices. So what we need to do is for people who can mobilise them around the most pressing concern that they have that's stopping them from taking action, whilst at the same time, when I don't know, political education is probably the right word to use, but engaging in conversations about how, if they're not aware, how that's interconnected to the climate crisis, how that's connected to healthcare, to housing. Because once you have people mobilising in an intersectional manner in all of these different things on the most pressing concern that's impacting them each and every single day, I think that's when you're going to start to see sort of gains, because they are achievable gains as well. I think this is another criticism of the degrowth movement. Sometimes, they're campaigning to change the economy. Right, okay, we need to actually be a bit more pragmatic, and we should be talking about that, but you're not going to get working class people on board by saying we need to do this or that to, all these abstract things. We need to start from square one.
Yeah. Sasha, have you got any ideas around
engagement? Yeah, I mean, this is why I joined the Working Class Climate Alliance, because these are the answers that I truly, truly, from the bottom of my heart, believe in and do every day. This is why I get up in the morning, because it really, it's organize, and I think there needs to be a twofold strategy that we have to have alongside that. So it's like the organizing around, the winnable things for working class issues for working class people in our community. So let's get some low-hanging fruits and actually prove that when we come together, collectivity works and we can win, and then we build from there. And the political education comes alongside that. That has to come from what people need to know for each level of that kind of strategy and their campaigns. And alongside that, I think we also need to build a movement that's really embedded kind of care, mutual aid, really understand collectivism. Because I think, Emma, you've said this before at the beginning, something about isolation and alienation. And it's we are it's come to a point where we're, you know, Thatcher did a number on us, let's face it, still hate her. Like, we are so isolated. The spirit of individuality has, you know, we're constantly being told that we're in it for ourselves. No one's gonna, like, the state isn't gonna come and help you. You know, you have each to their own. So, you know, we have COVID really, really embedded that as well. But alongside that, in our communities, we looked after each other. And when the floods hit in areas, in working class areas, we still look after each other. We look after each other in our community centres, in our libraries. We look after the vulnerable and women and children first, pregnant women and children first, and the elderly. Like, we know how to care for each other. We're good at this. We've had to be, and we shouldn't have had to be, but we do have that spirit, and we're going to need it, because, like, the crisis is here. Like, we, you know, it's upon us. The tornadoes are already hitting.
Yes.
So, like, actually kind of rooting our political analysis and organising those winnable issues, and then bringing that in. I mean, like, this is not new. Like, the Black Panthers, this is like classic Black Panthers, really, in terms of community organising strategy. But, like, that's the kind of base that we need to build now to make sure that we're going to be okay, that we can look after each other.
It's reigniting that traditional working class value, but also phrase, we look out for our own kind. We need to start saying it more, and to get that, like, let's get that back.
Look out for each other, yeah. And but my fear is, though, because it's crazy. Like, it's almost as if the climate crisis would have happened, say, 100 years ago, that sense of community, I think the buffer was a lot wider, because I do feel that, you know, neoliberalism and mass consumerism has really frayed our communities, in the sense that in order for capitalism to continue its growth, it has separated us all into atomized individuals, and made us all believe that we are all the center of the universe, and how we look is completely unique, and what music we listen to is completely unique, and our haircuts and everything about us is completely unique, and no one gets us, but it doesn't matter, because you are the only thing that matters, and it's kind of like the climate crisis for me couldn't have come at a worse time, because I feel like we're probably as far apart in our communities as possible. And another thing that's happened as well is the housing crisis, has meant that, you know, secure housing has been replaced by rental housing, you know. And I rent, just like most people. And the problem with renting is, because I don't know when I'm going to get that knock on the door to say, you know, I'm really sorry, you know, my son needs the house, or blah, 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 blah. You've got 3 months before you know, I'm really sorry, but, you know, here's your 3 months notice and all
We've
that.
all heard that one. My son needs the house. Oh.
Exactly, yeah. So because we're all susceptible to that, it does make you less committed to your street, to your area, because it's almost like your life's so busy, why put the time in to get to know your neighbours and the people in your area, if within 12 weeks you might get the knock on the door and you have to start it all over again. And I think the more that these are rental housing situation, again, it's fragmenting those bonds. Whereas my parents, and definitely my grandparents, they knew everyone. Everybody had their backs. Everybody shared resources. Everybody looked after each other's kids, you know, and that is what we somehow need to get back. So what's your thoughts on that?
I am probably a bit more optimistic than you, Ad.
Good. I need it. I need the optimism. Give it to me.
I think the people like your grandparents who do know everybody and, like, have a story to tell on about every corner and every brick, that those people are still there. And I think we've lost the tradition of organising and storytelling, which is why I keep coming back to that. Mm-hmm. Like, how do we tell the story of our communities, and how do we tell it, like, with so much hope that people will be like, oh, hang on a minute, I want to be a part of that, I want to come with you. And for me, we do that through organising. So it does literally become like one of the most revolutionary things a person who's not involved in politics at all can do. Just go up and down and talk to all your neighbours. Who are they? Like this, like, you know, that I always forget the name. I think it's Kenmare Street in Glasgow, the detention raids. Do you remember the name of the road? I can't remember the name of the road. There was a detention raid organising that happened in Glasgow.
Yes, I know the one.
And
They
stopped.
surrounded the van.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like that was traditional organising that did that.
Yeah.
They went up and down the road, like talking to people, so that when people saw the vans come out, they were like, "That's my neighbour, I know him."
Yeah.
And they came out. And it's like, so being able to go and do that up and down your street, find out who those people, who those grandmas and granddads are who know so-and-so and remember so-and-so, and then go to those people and then go to those people. And like, eventually you've got so many people who know each other. Like, that's how revolutions start.
Yeah.
And it sounds small, but like it grows quickly.
It's a great point. And also as well, I think I've got massive respect for organisations like Acorn.
Yeah.
You know, and I've said in the past, what I love about Acorn is they will go into high rent areas, but convince people that it's still worthwhile to have each other's backs. And I think that's so important. So I love the work they do.
Yeah, and also that links back to the Working Class Climate Alliance. It's like the solidarity and an alliance is really important. So how do people outside of our community learn how to show allyship and solidarity? Allyship rooted in class analysis. How do they do that? And so there's that other aspect of the work that Emma has created, which is about, okay, this is us. This is where you're at. This is what you need to do in order for our survival. So do it.
Yeah, I think that's so true. And I think also what you've highlighted there is these causes to be involved in that don't necessarily directly link to the climate crisis, but the knock-on value, if they are successful, will create things like communities. So, for example, if you get involved in the housing crisis and you make the demands that people like Acorn are making, that in itself can create that community spirit, which can then come together once that housing crisis has been solved, or at least fought for, along the line, where we can then say, right, we're here now, we're together, what else is there? So that's a really good point. I never really thought about it that way, but that's a really good point. Let's talk strategy. Yeah. So yes, let's talk strategy. So
our faces were like, ooh.
And goals. Strategy and goals. So we haven't got long left. So what's the ideas around sort of goals for the group, and so maybe some of the strategy around achieving those goals in the next 6 months to a year, let's say.
I'll start with the strategy first because it'll put it into context. So since we started, was it October last year? We've been focusing on. Don't know. I'm asking you.
Don't ask me. Yeah,
I was already fucking did it. We've been focusing on building a membership base remotely in and outside of the UK. I think we're across about 15 countries across the global north and south now. And now we're starting to bring everyone together. We've got internal ways for people to communicate, to get to know each other. We've got people going off and helping each other with campaigns, which it was like a proud mother watching her children go off to school. I'm like, yay, overthrow the state. But, so we've got that. And just getting people, I think, involved in ways that they can and understanding what it is people want to do. Because some people can mobilise, not everyone can, especially with the working class. And now we've got that in place, we're now having conversations with trade unions, and that's early days, so I need to keep that scanned. But what the next phase is connecting with them, working with them, campaigning with them, not telling them what they need to do, but supporting them in their campaigns, and then drawing on our networks to help. So it's now starting to link up all of these different factors with the trade unions, because we can't do one without the other. So really bringing class pride and solidarity.
Okay. Yeah.
And in terms of our aims, it's quite difficult to say exactly what we want to do. I think until we know effectively, sort of out of the trade unions who we're working with. So I'd say not so much quantifiable aims, more general, like advocacy for amplifying working class forms of environmentalism and awareness. Actually, one of my biggest aims this year is classism, fighting back against that, and increasing working class representation, because I think those two latter things really don't get a lot of attention. And when we think about working class sort of voices in the environmental movement, like big names, we've got Greta Thunberg, we've got all of that. Who have we actually got that's working class that's comparable? So it's
Sasha, have you got any personal or
yeah, I
organisational
mean, generally
goals?
speaking, with the Alliance, I will be pointed in the direction Emma puts me. If I can help, I will. And she's very good. You
can tell me if I'm going in the wrong direction.
No, it hasn't at all. I think the thing that is probably going to be strategically quite important for everyone, particularly in working class communities, is looking at the extreme authoritarian drift across UK and Europe, and what happens when we don't have the strong voices that Emma's talking about on the left, an anti-capitalist voice, working class led climate voice, is that the right swoop in and claim that narrative, and they're really good at it, and we're seeing that across all of Europe, and probably elsewhere. I just don't. My research doesn't go beyond that, beyond those. And I think it's really scary, and it's really important, because it will divide our community if we don't actually kind of like bring that together, and our voice needs to outshine theirs. And we need to find ways to out-organize them, because they have so much more resources than we do. They've got state backing, and approval, and we don't. But we, as we've talked about in the last hour, have so much more that we can draw on, so we can start to out-organize them. But it's going to be an important thing that we do in the next year.
Definitely. I'd say a priority for me personally has to be around messaging, because you mentioned the right there. The right have the wrong answers, but they have simple answers. They have very simple black and white answers, that are easy to digest. It's full of shit, but when you're not sure, and when somebody says, "Don't worry, it will be okay," that's what you want to hear. You want to hear someone say, "It will be okay as long as we get rid of them, or do this." And
we heard that in the last election, didn't we? Get Brexit done, get Brexit done, get Brexit done. It's like, and then how? And then what? Like, what's your plan?
Take back control.
Take back control.
As students of history, we've heard this many times, and it can go to levels we never want to go again, don't we? So we need to. The thing is about climate crisis, it's actually really fucking complex. Sadly, the science is forever changing. Dates are being pushed back on occasion because new things are being learned. And when this seems to be this sort of ambiguous because it's real, science is not this sort of like you pull it out of a box and there's the answer. It's ever going, it's ever flowing, and data changes things slightly here and there. Whereas the right, it's just like, it's yes or no, it's black or white, it's safe or unsafe. And that's what we've got to come across. And I think with working class people, because as Emma's already said, it's not necessarily at the top of their priority list. They just they want simple, easy messaging that's going to make them feel safe. And the challenge for us is to say, working class people have never been safe, and we've overcome things that just seem to be insurmountable. So let's act like adults. Let's draw on the past. We're not safe, and let's just face it. Let's face the fact that we're not safe. And let's fight it like we have done in the past. So in the past, our ancestors have had their own struggles. We have got the biggest struggle of them all, and we cannot shirk that responsibility. And I think if we're brutally honest with ourselves, and we can draw some of that energy from the past, you know, I think that's probably the best way forward. What do you reckon?
Sounds about right.
That's like a good
yeah. If I'm in the trenches, I'm glad I'm in there with you two.
yeah. Well,
couldn't think of two better people.
Listen, it's been great to talk to you both. Obviously, I know Emma anyway, so I will be following what you do. We always promote great work, and we always promote, you know, especially working class work as well, which we'll continue to do. So keep us in the loop, guys. And listen, it's great to talk to you. So, some of my favourite episodes is when we're talking about this sort of stuff. So thank you so much for your time tonight.
Always pleasure.
Okay, guys, this is the part of the show that's dedicated to the fighters, the healers, and the conservers of the world that are doing their bit for all of us. It's the shout out. Emma, who have you got for us this week?
So I've got the Class Work Project. They're a workers' cooperative, and they're amazing. They organise around class identity, stigma, experience and oppression. They educate and train people for better cross-class organising, which is so needed. And they also have a journal for poor and working class writers called Lumpen, that anyone is sort of welcome to submit to. I think they've got an open submissions until July 15th. But their aims are to examine the ways, you know, in which our lives are shaped by our class position. So it's a really great hub of building working class pride, but also cross-class solidarity with the middle class.
Excellent. Yeah, I've not heard of those before, but we'll link them into the show. That's brilliant. Sasha, who have you got for us this week?
I mean, my comrades and true inspiration in all things to do with Green New Deal and other politics is Trademark Belfast. Cool. Sean and Stevie, I'm like just the most amazing analysis of current affairs as well as history and climate issues, and they're anti-racist, anti-sectarian, trade union rooted, and absolutely amazing lads. And also, just to add a little one in, the Feminize Politics Now group, which is also looking at how we make sure that we, in our movement activities and in our organizations, we're not replicating white supremacy and the structures of white supremacy, and actually like living the values that we believe. And so they work with organizations to actually have feminist leadership principles, which is pretty cool.
Amazing. Yeah, that's awesome. And I'm going to give a couple of shout outs as well this week. Obviously, the theme is the working class, and there's two groups that spring to mind straight away. The first one is a group called Reclaim, who try and educate and empower young working class people. And the second one, I've sort of mentioned him in the show, but it's got to be Acorn. You know, they've just literally in the last few days, they coordinated 30 banks to be like sittings and demanding sort of that. I think it was a TSB actually that you need to stop doing certain things, and they won as well. So I'll link all the details so people will know it. You know exactly what it was that they won, but a fantastic group, and it was just talking about how they can create that solidarity, that working class solidarity in areas of high rent, which is fantastic. So a big thank you for both your shout outs, and also a big thank you to the groups that I've shouted out, and a big thank you to everyone that is listening. And remember, if you are helping the planet in any way at all, no matter how big or small, we love you, we appreciate you, and we hope you join us again next time. Take care, everyone.
We'd like to say a massive thank you to all of our supporters on Patreon, and a special shout out to our top tier patrons: Barbara Burke, Yermund, Jill Burke, Jolyn Stone, Karen Taylor, Lizzie, Marie-Louise O'Hanrahan, and Steve Smith. Thank you so much for your support. If you'd like to join these amazing people and support the show, head to patreon.com/G&D Media UK. And if you can't afford to help us out, please leave us a review on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you so much.